but we appreciate you all taking some time out of your Friday morning to join us for the last Emerging Topics Series session for UEDA for 2021. And we are very excited today to feature Milwaukee's Collective Affordable Housing Strategic Plan in partnership with the Community Development Alliance. And so please feel free to keep putting in the chat who you are and where you're from. It's always great to get a sense of who's with us. I know many of you may have participated in the Community Development Alliance meetings or CDA meetings, but we are going to do a few different things. So some of this may be a bit of review for you, but we've also got, we're going to be talking a lot about what implementation might look like. So with that, I'm going to start the slideshow. So welcome everyone. We appreciate, like I said, you joining us today for what has been really quite a year, I think, when we think about housing issues in Milwaukee and all of the interest and energy and catalyzation that is going on around an issue that many of us have been working in for a really long time. And so I think a lot of us feel that the time is now, if you will, to really come together strategically and see what we can do to reduce some of these disparities and address these affordable housing issues that we see. So about UEDA, we are a membership association of people and groups working in economic and community development. You see our programs listed there. We do a lot of work in home ownership, as well as we have a project with the Rental Housing Resource Center. So I've been doing a lot more in that space in the last year and a half. Bank on Green in Milwaukee, which focuses on economic inclusion. And then we do a lot of capacity building, convening, and technical assistance with many of you who have joined us today. If you are not a member of UEDA or you have been and you have lapsed, please feel free to join us. We would love to have you be part of our network. And you can go to our website and do that. We are actually in the process of a website redesign. So that will be something exciting to look forward to this winter, but you can still join there or you can email me directly for the link. So today, like I said, we are going to talk about the Collective Affordable Housing Strategic Plan that the CDA has put forward and working in partnership with many people in the sector and the city of Milwaukee. And we're going to talk a little bit about what has emerged as the top approaches, and then some of what we, and we would like you to sort of provide some input on how implementation might look. So today, we'll hear from Damien from Chase Bank, who has kindly agreed to be a supporter of UEDA and sponsor. They're a longtime supporter of ours. Lafayette Crump, the commissioner of the Department of State Development, Gina Stilp from the Zilber Family Foundation, and Vanessa Koster from DCD as well. And Teague unfortunately can't join us today. Something came up, but we'll be filling in where we can. And then lastly, you. So you can see the little logo up there on the right. Mentimeter is a tool we'll be using. So hopefully many of you are familiar with it. You can use your phone or your computer screen to provide your feedback directly that way. So I think what I'm going to do first before we move on, I'm going to actually go to the next slide. And then I am going to do a quick poll. Something kind of fun. I was feeling a little silly. So if you were a weather report, what would your forecast be for today? So please feel free to make your selection. How are you feeling today about the weather? Still no votes for snow. Oh, we got a few now. I'm somebody who actually likes winter, so I felt like I had to include something. All right. Well, it looks like everybody's feeling a different kind of way today. So that is good, I think. I think it's always kind of fun to think about where we are in this moment in time and when we come to these things. And I think that's a lot about our mindset. And when we come to folks like this, things like this, where we're doing feedback and providing our input. So thank you. The weather is never right? I don't know. So thank you all. I'll put the results up. I always forget to share the results. So, but we are all feeling some kind of way. All right. So now I'm going to move on to the agenda. So you'll see here, we have the session overview, the overview of the plan. We're going to talk about these 2022 approaches, looking at implementation, and then we'll actually have a little bit of information around some of the resources that are anticipated coming down in the near future. And then Gina will share a little bit about the community engagement process and some of the things that we'll see. So now, if Damien from Chase Bank would like to say a few words. Damien, I think I see you there. If you'd like to unmute yourself. I can stop sharing too, so I can see everybody just to make sure. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good. Well, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties there. And pardon me, I'm a little bit under the weather. So it's a good thing I'm not there in person. Good morning, everyone. My name is Damien Herron, and I am with JP Morgan Chase. First, I just want to start out by saying thank you to Christy for creating the platform and bringing us together to have these really important conversations. And I was looking across and I saw some friendly faces. So hello to all our friends. The JP Morgan Chase team is eager to kind of get back and see everyone, as things open up. So we're having a very important conversation about housing stability, housing affordability, and the importance of not only homes as a safe space, a safe haven, but as a means to kind of grow wealth and build wealth, generational wealth over time. And so we see housing is not only a safe space, but certainly a way that families can transfer wealth from one generation to the next. And that is why, JP Morgan Chase, we are taking an all of the above approach to housing. We are working on providing resources through our foundation and corporate responsibility. But we know that those resources are limited. The most important thing that we can do as a company is to make sure that the business is doing all that it can do to kind of support not only mortgages, but more units of affordable housing. And so last year, the firm made a $30 billion commitment to support racial equity. Now, those resources are across the board. We're doing everything from small business to workforce development to supplier diversity. But a big chunk of those resources are going to be put into making sure that we are creating as much affordable housing and providing as much mortgages as possible in Black and Brown census tracts across the country. And so whereby we're about to approach the 1-year mark of that investment. And I think we have a fantastic story to tell. We've been laying the infrastructure to make sure that we can provide as many mortgages to Black and Brown borrowers as possible. And that includes hiring HLAs all across the country that are compensated in a way that will incentivize them to seek out units within Black and Brown census tracts. We are committing, through the foundation, we've committed over $400 million to support affordable housing projects across the country. And then through the business, we've committed as a part of that 30 billion, upwards of $7 billion put into making sure that folks have affordable mortgages, that there's extra units of affordable housing, and rent stability across the country. And we are just getting started. What does that mean for Milwaukee? In addition to our local philanthropic dollars that we've committed to kind of support various housing programs, some of our partners are on this call right now. We've also hired HLAs dedicated to making sure that we are reaching out to folks all across the market to provide them with down payment assistance. We've expanded our credit box to make sure that we are trying to reach everyone. And then we've changed our product set to make sure that we are taking advantage of like all of the various products, including FHA products and our own Dreammaker, that we can then pair those products and down payment assistance with other programs to make sure that we give as many, particularly again, Black and brown borrowers as good a chance as possible to get into a home and build wealth over time. So that's a very high level of some of the things that David Moore Chase is doing. I think we will continue to do that. I think you will continue to see our people on the ground as things open up. And again, we are just getting started. It's fantastic to have partners like Christy and Take Root and all the partner members of that organization to help us as we continue to make sure that we get the word out, we get as much coaching and education as possible, and of course, that we continue to provide resources through the business to support affordable housing. So, Christy, thank you for the opportunity to kind of do this welcome. I look forward to the conversation, and good morning and goodbye to all our friends out there.
Well,
Christy.
thank you, Damien. And I hope you feel better. You sound like about as where I was about a week ago. So I'm also getting over something. Okay, so I also wanted to mention, I just put this in the chat. We are recording. Obviously, you got the notice, but the slides will also be shared as well as the recording after today's session. So now we are going to move on to the next part, and we're going to have some remarks from Mr. Crump from the Department of City Development, and then Gina will join us to take us through the Collective Affordable Housing Strategic Plan. Okay, so Mr. Crump, if you'd like to say a few.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Christy. And good morning, everyone. It's really great to see so many of you, seeing some faces and lots of names. Great to be here with you virtually and to talk about the promising work that's been done over the past year or so and that which is still to come. As a member of the CDA Executive Committee, I'm so grateful for all of the partners and stakeholders that are joined together today who are bringing meaningful solutions in your own right to the table that will help us address housing insecurity and inequity in Milwaukee. To start, I'm very proud that my DCD staff and our Fuse Fellow supported the creation of the CDA Collective Affordable Housing Strategic Plan, and it's serving as the City of Milwaukee's interagency housing plan, including our team was able to lead the data collection and analysis and housing data scan that established the plan goals and informed the recommendations that you'll hear more about here today. So thank you to Cordella, thank you to Vanessa, to Maria, to Sam, everyone else on our city team, both internal and external to DCD, for lending your time and your expertise to this important effort. And thank you as well, of course, to the CDA Funders Council, to Gina, to Teague, and to all of those whom I connect with every Thursday morning to do this work. Today is about discussing the goals of the plan and how we can work together to move these approaches forward. As you may know, this plan, it's a collective vision. It's got offensive strategies, defensive strategies, all recommendations to close the racial equity gap for Black and Latino home ownership and to ensure affordable rental housing options for everyone. Takes existing approaches and enhances their reach while deploying new solutions to accomplish the goals that the plan sets out. From a Department of City Development perspective, I can tell you that much of what we do and care about is incorporated into this effort. Our own down payment assistance efforts, our focus on anti-displacement policies, our work leveraging tools and resources to increase affordable housing options, efforts helping current and prospective homeowners repair and keep their properties through many of our initiatives and counseling services, as well as our deep commitment to promoting and ensuring and improving racial equity and inclusion. Through our amazing partners in the Community Development Alliance and the newly completed Collective Affordable Housing Plan, we've got a really unique opportunity here to advance racial equity by providing a quality, affordable home for families and residents across Milwaukee. Personally, perhaps what I love most about this plan is its quantitative vision. There's a recognition of the specific numbers that we're battling. Over 60,000 opportunities to improve lives, to ensure stability, and as Damien mentioned, wealth creation opportunities. And a quantitative recognition also of the time it will take to get there. I love that we're putting the numbers down and figuring out what we need to do and how we're going to get there and how we do it together. And this is, of course, where all of you come in. I want everyone to make their voices heard today and going forward in this collaborative process. The success of this plan relies on all of us to roll up our sleeves and bring our ideas and resources to the table that will create better outcomes for all of those whom we serve. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, to hearing your input, and to continuing our important work together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lafayette. We appreciate it. And I have to say, as an organization that spends a lot of time convening across sectors, I was really heartened last year when a lot of the discussion came around how the CDA and DCD could work together. And I think that has been the critical thing, that we're all now really focusing in on two big goals, two big priorities. And then to your point with the quantitative part, you kind of got to get into the weeds there and break it down into something that feels like you can take on, right? And you only do that by bringing that kind of level of scrutiny and then thinking about what small part could I probably play in this larger goal. So now I'm going to hand it off to Gina. We're going to go through some of the overview of the process to date and approaches, and then we will head into a section for you all to provide some feedback around implementation using Mentimeter. But I will note too, if you have questions as we go, or you want to put comments in the chat, feel free. Camille will be monitoring the chat too. And so that's always an opportunity. We'll try to answer some questions as we go. Some may be answered throughout the presentation. So Gina.
Thanks, Christy. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gina Still. I'm the Executive Director of the Zilber Family Foundation. And also, I have been chairing the Community Development Alliance for the past year plus. Christy, do you want me to share slides, or do you want to do slide shares?
I can do it. So just let me know when to.
Today, I just first want to say thanks to Christy. Thank you for pulling this together. I know this is a lot of work to put into bringing your partners together for such important conversations, particularly during such a crazy time in all of our lives. So thanks for being here and making time on your Friday morning. And thank you, Damien and Commissioner. I think having you both set the tone today is really important. As they said so eloquently, this is our plan. It's a collective plan. We need all sectors to buy into this and to participate in the implementation of this plan for it to be successful. And so I'm so glad we have both our private sector, our philanthropic, and our public sector partners, not only here today, but really integral to this planning process. I will start by saying I'm usually the wingman for Teague Whaley Smith, who's been our project director and project manager on this. So I'm sorry you're stuck with me today, but I'll do my best to bring us through the process that we've used over the past 8 months. And for a lot of you, I know you've seen a version of this presentation, but I do see some names on here that maybe have not had the chance to see this presentation and understand the work that we've done to get to this point today. So my goal today is to kind of bring you up to speed relatively quickly on what this process looked like so that we can talk about where we are today, which is moving from strategic planning into implementation planning. You can go to the next slide, Christy. So as Lafayette said, the CDA has adopted a broad vision, which is advancing racial equity by providing quality, affordable home for every Milwaukeean. Next. How do we plan on doing that? So CDA, for those of you who don't know, has been around for more than a decade. And for many, in our first iteration, we're really focused, broadly speaking, on community development. And so we had a group of funders, partners, cross-sector practitioners working on a variety of issues. And in 2020, we decided, we're all working on housing. We see the dire need in our community to be more aligned and more focused on implementation and aligning resources on affordable housing. And so we expanded our governance structure to include the folks that you see here on the left, which are all housing funders or implementers in some way. And then we also expanded into a project team of subject matter experts. And we have leveraged a lot of the work that's been done in the community from various action planning, housing plans, city plans, to bring that data to bear as we started this process of combining a citywide and publishing a citywide affordable housing strategy. Go to next. So the process that we used in early what year are we in? In 2021, we engaged Teague Whaley-Smith to work with us on a strategic plan. Teague comes from government, and so he brought with him the GARE process, which really allowed us to, from the get-go, adopt a racial equity vision. And so we set that vision early on, and then we went through a process of data collection, stakeholder engagement, and we developed a strategy. And so today we're at number 5 on your right. We're in this implementation process. And so as we go through today, we're really going to end there and look to you to give us some feedback on what implementation could look like. You can go to next. So a lot of us on this call today care deeply about affordable housing, and we've been working in this field for much of our professional careers. And so when we got started, we had to figure out, where do we want to work? We can't do everything. If everything's important, nothing's important. And so we had to figure out where our sweet spot in the housing market would be. Milwaukee has a very successful and coordinated continuum of care that works with folks who are earning below that 725 threshold. And then we have market strategies that are above that $32 threshold that should work without subsidy. And so we are really honed in on that middle, that 725 and above. And you'll see we even get more specific in terms of our income ranges as we move into affordable homeownership versus affordable rental. So with that as our framework, as we got started, we moved into data collection. And we can go to the next slide. And huge thanks to the city and to our data partners, the Wisconsin Policy Forum. Much of this research had been done for us. And these numbers should look really familiar. We know that there are huge racial equity gaps when it comes to home ownership. Milwaukee, as we all know, is one of the worst in the nation when it comes to this gap. And so we early on identified that we have a disparity of 32,000 units. And that became a number that we clung to as we continue to think about, what do we do about that? Our next, you can go to the next, Christy. The next thing we did, and this again should look familiar, Wisconsin Policy Forum helped us with this research as we started this planning process to identify what's the demand for affordable rental housing in Milwaukee. And we see a big mismatch here. Families who are earning less than that $12, $15, $16 an hour really are not able to find units in Milwaukee that are affordable to them. And so what we see is we have a mismatch in what's affordable to families living in our community. That means that families are doubling up. They're paying way more than 50% of their income on their rental costs. They're living in substandard units. They're facing all kinds of mobility challenges. And we really need to think about what is affordable, not based on AMI, not based on national averages. We need to think about what's affordable for families living in our city. So this is where you'll see we really are going to focus in on that $7.25 to $15 an hour as our target for rental housing. And the numbers are very similar here. You'll see that another 32,000 units are either needed to be produced or converted for this population in Milwaukee. Go to next. And so very early in this process, after our data collection process, we identified these 4 areas. As Lafayette said, we've sort of thought about it as offense and defense on both. So we know that we need systems to increase Black and Latino home ownership as well as to preserve. And then on the rental side, again, we need these systems in place to either convert or preserve and improve the quality on units that are in that $725 to $15 an hour affordability range. And I think in the interest of trying to move through this quickly, we can go to the next, Christy. We skipped a slide or 2 here, but I really do want to just say the engagement process that we use is really important. And when we got started, CDA said there's so much data and there has been so much community engagement done around the issue of affordable housing. Let's leverage the resources that are already there. And so we looked at the consolidated plan that UEDA led. We looked at city plans. We looked at neighborhood plans. More than 1,000 residents were engaged in those processes. And so we use that as a foundation to say, what do we need to do to set a strategy? We then convened a set of action groups around those offense and defense for home ownership and for rental. And we were blessed to have amazing conveners from Lamont Davis and Brianna Cespedes from VIA CDC, who took those groups through a set of root cause analysis. And so you'll see here this image. Thank you, Cordella, for bringing this to us. But this sort of explains a little bit of the process that we used. And so you'll see on the top, we saw root causes. Families need more support before and after home buying a home. And so we know that we need to grow home buyer counseling as well as post-purchase homeowner counseling. Existing homeowners can't afford to stay in their homes. And so you'll see show up in the plan that we need additional property tax assistance or innovation in home repair programs. And so through this process, this was about a month long, our stakeholders engaged, and it helped us then set some core strategies that you'll see in the strategic plan. So we can go to the next. And so there's a lot of text here. The plan is available online, but essentially you'll see in each of these Black and Latino homeownership and on the rental, we looked to our partners and looked to existing plans to document the set of top strategies that emerged. These also came through feedback with our Community Development Alliance quarterly meetings. And so we have this set of strategies on the left for increasing and this preservation list. I won't read them all, but we'll keep going, Christy. And we went through the same process on our affordability on rental side. All of these strategies, again, are helping us identify how can we produce those 32,000 units for homeownership and those 32,000 units for families earning $725 to $15 an hour. So in this strategy, you'll see, based on the numbers and the data and the engagement process that we went through, we have set some quantitative goals. We have a 10-year goal and we have a 30-year goal. In 10 years, we believe that we can achieve 8,250 new opportunities for Black and Latino homeowners and 9,750 homes for families making $725 to $15 an hour. That is going to require a huge influx of resources. We estimate $69 million in new grants and $66 million in new loan capital. We also have some projections for the 30-year. And so this is really, for me, having been working in this field for a long time, this is something that I've been craving to say, how can we define what the problem is? What is the supply and demand issue that we're facing? And what types of resources do we need to fill gaps and to really move the needle on our equity goal? You can go to next. And so as we set out on this planning process, we went through the first 8 months in strategic planning. We know that we have to get to implementation. And so our goal really is to have some implementation plans defined by the end of the year, so that by the time we get to 2022, we're really looking at identifying solutions and finding the resources to put those solutions into the marketplace. By no means will this be an easy process. And so we are really looking today to you to help us figure out, what do we do next? How do we move from strategic vision, from strategic plan into priority setting for a smaller set of strategies? Again, we know CDA doesn't have the capacity right now to take on everything that we saw in the plan. And so we really need to look to our partners to help us hone in on those that are most important, and then hone in on the actual process of moving to implementation.
So here is where we are going to test the new tool. I'm sending up a little prayer and hoping this works. Like I said, I'm the first time I'm actually facilitating this. So we are going to use menti.com. So here's the feedback tool. It'll also be at the top of the slides that you can use when we, as we go through our first feedback question, which is, how do you see this plan aligning with your own work or interests in affordable housing? So knowing what the priorities are, the approaches, and sort of where you are in this space, how do you see yourself or the organization or entity or affiliation aligning with that? So if you go to menti.com, you can do this on your phone and on another screen, or bring up another browser tab and do that. And then, oh wait. Okay, it should be open. Now I feel like I need to test it.
It worked for me, Christy.
Okay, good. Like I just need somebody to put
I
it on.
scanned the QR code and I'm in.
Woohoo!
This is a new one for me.
Yes. I was telling people earlier, I was like, I made my husband do a test version with me last night. It's like, this is the first time he had actually even been on a Zoom.
That's amazing.
I know, yes. He's been taking care of our daughter as a full-time caretaker until recently, so I felt like it was a nice distraction for him.
And I'll just maybe jump in here, Christy, just for a little sidebar comment, which is we hope that, as folks read the full plan, that there is alignment. And so whether it's alignment on the issues that we are prioritizing in 2022 or issues that maybe haven't been selected for prioritization, we are looking for partners to still stay in alignment on all of the strategies that are in the plan. So we hope you see yourselves in there somewhere.
Yes. And I think that was the, I'm actually trying to put in response and we'll talk at the same time. We all know how well that's going to go. But I think that, with UEDA, there's a lot of work we do in this space that actually may not be completely tied to the approaches of the CDA, but actually can support the other strategies and priorities in the plan. And so that's another thing for groups to think about is, again, we're all focused on these two big priorities, but a lot of what we do can really contribute that, even if it's not an approach that gets elevated to an implementation team by the CDA. A lot of us are doing similar enough work. So I am going to, got 15 responses. I'll wait for 2 more minutes and then we can move on. Oh. Sorry, Brian, thank you. If I'm going too fast to scroll, just let me know. I can go back up too. But we'll do 1 more minute. I also think that naturally occurring affordable housing is something that is mentioned in the plan, but it is something that I was on the defensive work group for rental, and that's something that is such a huge component of that, and also preservation of our already affordable units. And so that's something that I think we all need to keep our eye on, even among these other priorities. So.
And I think it's such a good point, Christy, that there's lots of organizations doing this work. And so by no means is CDA trying to replace or, I don't know, move into the market in a way where we'd be excluding others. We want to lift the work that everyone is doing and add value to some of these strategies where we see opportunity for collective action.
Right. I also, this one about the framework to help guide the work. One of the things that I really try to think about at UEDA is, I mean, we all know, like, especially if you're a nonprofit, you do some planning work, strategic planning. A lot of businesses do that. This plan itself is a strategic plan, right? But it's helpful when you have something like this to kind of think about where your own organization, your mission, your work align what you do versus trying to come up with it yourself, right? Like there's a lot of great ideas, a lot of good work. And so this framework, I think, lets me think about it. UEDA, okay, we have this Take Root Milwaukee program. Well, we do different things every year within Take Root. So maybe there's something that we can focus on in the next year that actually helps add to lift up one of these priorities. And so that's what I really encourage our members and our network to think about is, what are you doing that's already connected, but could be done in a more strategic or targeted way that not only supports your mission, but the goals of the plan. Okay, so I am going to see to the bottom if there was any more. Yep, affordable housing, great. So I am going to stop this. Is that close voting? I'm going to close voting. All right, so now, Gina, we're going to go into the approaches that came out of October 1st, if I remember.
Yeah, so admittedly, we're in a little bit of a strange place today in terms of getting feedback. So I just want to put that out there. So the process we used, as you saw earlier, there were many strategies in each of the offense and defense areas. And so on October 1st, we had our quarterly CDA meeting. We had about 60 participants weigh in on prioritizing the strategies. And we then went back to our program and our project committees, who are the subject matter experts who have been really engaged with CDA this whole process. And through, we saw a lot of alignment. And so what lifted immediately was this creation of an acquisition fund for both homeownership and affordable rental models. Growing homebuyer counseling and down payment assistance by 10% a year was really clearly in the front as well. And then this idea of creating new models. So both production models and leveraging new technologies and financial models to get us to producing new types of structures and creating new financial tools. So this was approved by the CDA's executive committee this week, Monday. So this is very fresh. We are just now in the phase of saying these are the three that the CDA intends to move forward with in 2022. We can't do everything, but we think that this is a really great start for us. And so our next steps are looking to you, our partners, our subject matter experts, our implementers, to help us identify the best way for us to move forward. We know that we will, there are some, I think, sort of natural next steps for us because we are really using a collective impact model. We intend to have work groups that are structured around each of these three strategies. And we are about to hire a executive director for the CDA, which will happen in early 2022. So there will be a more formal structure, but we really have a lot of questions around what we should be focusing on as we move into those work groups. And so we wanted to really turn it back to you all, our experts and our partners, to say, help us. We really need you to guide to this next phase of the process. We are here to make sure that this is a collective effort and to make sure that we are staying true to our racial equity lens and laying a groundwork for collective action. So a little bit more on these strategies. So the acquisition fund has been talked about really since the beginning, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about a desire for acquisition funds, whether it's for commercial development or for residential development over the years. But one of the main issues that we surfaced in our data collection process was that we're really losing a lot of homes. In the last 15 years, we've lost about 6,300 homes from homeownership to investor owners. We also have seen the packaging of rental properties sold to investor owners who are seeking 20% ROI. And those investors are not putting any money back into the properties. They're largely maintaining high rents in low quality units. And a lot of those would be considered naturally occurring affordable housing. So we really have a dilemma here where how can we make sure that we're maintaining local control? As you might imagine, many of those properties are located in neighborhoods with majority Black and Latino residents, and we just can't compete. The private market transactions are happening all cash, no inspections. The economies of scale they have allows them to take a lot more risk on when they're buying these portfolios. And so this has really been an issue. So we have a lot of questions. An acquisition fund is an idea. What we really need to do is put some meat on the bone here and talk about what should it do? Should it be supporting the purchase of individual homes? Should it be large portfolio sales? Should we be focusing on expiring subsidized apartments? We've talked about low-cost patient capital for both nonprofit and for-profit developers to rehab and market for home ownership. And the implementation planning process will help us dig into those details. So the fund size, the criteria, the structure, the management, the investors, and the impact. So that's really a lot of work, but that's kind of in a nutshell what we're talking about for the acquisition fund. And a lot of you on the call today are intimately involved in this homebuyer counseling and down payment assistance side of the work. Thank you for what you're doing. Without you, we would be, I don't know where we'd be. It's scary to think about. And so you're already serving 7,300 individuals, and take root. Thank you. A lot of this data came from the work that you and your partners have done. And about 850 of those are transitioning to homeownership. And so we're converting about 11%. It's a low-cost model, generally speaking, because we have strong partners already in the market, and it's a tried and true model. I think where we see opportunity is to increase the capacity of the agencies doing this work. Does that mean more staff? Does that mean more innovation in your services? Does it mean finding new resources so that anyone who comes through your door can access some of the incentive funding around down payment assistance? So we really know that there's experts in the field who can help us quickly on this one. We've initially identified an investment of about $16 million over 10 years, which would help us get to that 10% annual increase. And then last but not least, this one I think will be really fun. This is really the create new production models. So I know many of us are aware that there's all kinds of new modern technologies in housing development, and there's lots of different financing tools and ownership models that we could look at. One strategy that has surfaced pretty quickly too in this process has been using the 4% state and federal housing tax credits. And so it's a tool. I'm getting outside of my comfort zone here because this is really Teague's area of expertise. But using this tool would allow us to potentially leverage more tax credits. It would require us to use the 15-year rental term and then convert those to home ownership. And one of the ways we would do this is by pooling some additional resources through impact investment to fill gap and provide guarantee funding on this. So I think there's already some partners who are pretty interested and excited about this as an opportunity. The other one that is also sort of in development already is around this new technologies. And some of you may know that the Eco office at the city of Milwaukee has been really advocating for bringing a manufacturer of prefab homes to the 30th Street corridor. This would again allow for cheaper construction, for eco-friendly, low eco, you know what I mean? I'll move on. But, and then also it would be a job creation. So the intent would be to build it at Century City. And so I think we see this as a real kind of win-win on both the economic development and on the housing side. And then other partners today have been really advocating for these alternative homeownership models. We've got land trusts and housing cooperatives. And we've also heard, this is where I think it's so important to have lived experience and resident engagement, is that a lot of families want to live close together. And so we have multi-generational households right now who are cramped and can't afford to split up, but maybe having two structures on one lot, or thinking differently about how we design homes for families who are multi-generation. And then we have a big bucket around policy and advocacy around zoning codes and other issues in that bucket that we could really dig into. So back to you guys.
Sorry, I was trying to find my mouse. It was like, I was trying to put a thing in the chat. I was going to say that last time around zoning codes and neighborhoods. That is seen, I think, most clearly in the most recent new North Side area plan, where you just saw residents articulating different kinds of housing stock, different types of housing in an area where you had these traditional sort of older housing stock that we've seen. So I think that's a great plan to point to when you kind of think that about that differently. So we have up these 3 approaches for sort of like a voting / ranking that we're actually going to zero in on for our implementation questions. And so this would be a way for you guys to sort of help us think about what the team should look like, who should be on them. Are there people like outside of the team, but like inform the work and that kind of a thing. So nobody for home buyer counseling and DPA.
We know you're out there.
Yeah, I feel like I should vote for it just because, you know. But I will say to Gina's point on the slide that the interesting thing about that is it is very investment ready. Like there is a really strong infrastructure there. And so the implementation team might actually be more about how do we really accelerate what we're doing? You know, how do we increase that conversion rate? So I am going to vote for it just so the slide doesn't look like empty. I just facilitator's choice on that one. Thanks, whoever just did that one. So we'll, I'll wait one more minute. Maybe this is an easier question. I think you could vote more than once too, I think this, or maybe I actually only let people vote once for this one. I can't remember what I did. So, but if you also want to put it in the chat too, feel free to put those comments. We are sort of monitoring that as well. So, and I'm going to give you guys a little hint. I didn't want to promise this at the very beginning, but even though we set aside 2 hours for this session, I thought we might run ahead. And so, yes, we will probably end before 11. So nobody's ever sad about getting time back, I think, these days. And yes, Michelle, we will be sending the recording out. So I'm sorry that you keep getting kicked out. And so if you are interested in voting, go to the menti.com up there. Sorry, we had the QR code up earlier, but you can then put in that code and then it should bring up this slide for you to vote on. So, ooh, acquisition fund and production models are tied now. So I'll wait one more minute just to see if we, oh boy, we get something to break the tie. Otherwise, maybe Gina, I might have you pick one.
I think this is exciting though to see folks are really interested in these new models. Okay. I'll wait for one more and then I'm going to close. Come on, tiebreaker. We know you're out there. Someone wants to tip the scale.
Yeah, no one wants to be responsible. We don't know who you are, though. That's the beauty of menti.com. So. Okay. Okay. All right. Somebody did just message me one, but it looks like they voted for all 3, and I can't actually vote again. I think this is the one that I can't do, and I already voted for one because I didn't want it to be empty. So, all right. Well, no takers.
That's okay.
Make us wait. So we are going to start out with a couple. So we have quite a bit of interest in acquisition fund and new production models, which, as Gina just alluded to, I think is really exciting for those of us that work in this space. We know that these are ideas that have been around for some time, right? Milwaukee, if you want to think about it, might be quote unquote behind the curve. But I think where we are now in terms of the strategy and the planning makes us very primed to do this. And so I think, and it looks like we got one more vote for all the new production models. So we'll focus on that one. But I think that those are 2 ideas that are long overdue in this community. So we're excited that these are being lifted up. Okay, so how are we going to do this? How should CDA approach this implementation process? So this is your turn. We're going to do some like very process oriented questions. So I know that might be kind of boring, but it is actually really important. And that gets to the comments that Gina has been talking about in terms of this collective action approach. You know, we want to make sure that it's inclusive and effective and apparent. You know, we can't have all 45 of us on this call today on one work group. That's just not feasible, right? So what do we do to create a team that can help advance the work but that everyone else who is not on the team is aware of what's happening and thinking about how they can support that work as plans move forward. So Gina, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
I would just add, I think when we started this process, one of the things that we kept hearing was like, wow, people are going to so many meetings about housing. And I know that's true for so many of us. And so I think what we don't want to do is create like another meeting mill. We really want to make sure that we're bringing in the thought leaders on these issues and leveraging the other coalitions, the Take Roots that are already out there, and making sure that we're, being thoughtful about not creating a lot more work, but using the expertise that's already out there.
Yes, and I'll just add too, to that point, there's, it's great. A lot of the same people at the same tables because they have great expertise and experience. But it would be great to get people who aren't normally at the table because maybe they don't have the time usually, but this is something that maybe we can ask them. It would be really great because we know you do amazing work and you have a lot of knowledge that you can bring to something like this. So that's the other, I think thought behind that. So the next question is, so you can go to the site again. This is the next slide. And how many people do you think should be on each committee? To Gina's point, we want this balance of inclusivity, but effectiveness, if you will. I'm trying to remember the phrase Bill, my former boss, used to say something about a committee designed by a camel is a horse, or I don't know, something to the point you get too many people and you end up with something that's not whatever. So
yeah, right. And I think we want to move quickly, thoughtfully, but the point of this, us picking CDA picking three, is that we want to get to action. And sometimes having too many cooks in the kitchen can slow that down.
Right. That's probably a better metaphor than the horse and the camel one that I can't actually remember.
I'm going to look that one up though. And we've all been on how many umpteen committees. So this will be really helpful to see what you think has worked for you or for other initiatives you've been involved with.
Right. And remember, there's that broader CDA infrastructure around it of their committees and good point, Brian, like the expectation maybe setting around this is that there's work to be done here. Thank you, Todd. Camel is a horse designed by a committee. But the idea that being that there's another infrastructure, there's, UEDA has a broad network where we can create opportunities for people to still be engaged, even if they're not on a committee, right? And to be informed. So. And
to note too, CDA will still intend to have quarterly meetings and have, report outs and feedback sessions. And so I think the committee will be driving the agenda, but we'll definitely keep our stakeholders engaged.
Right. We'll wait one more minute and then we will. I'm just going to get my slides in order.
I'm surprised a little to see 5 to 8. I'm pleased, but you're going to make this very difficult to figure out how we get to 5 to 8.
Yeah, you could choose 8 because, I have overlapping numbers there. I guess
that's true.
Okay. Oh, the Menti code is 3936185. Oh, thank you, Gina.
Yep.
I suppose I could have typed it too. As you can see, I've been drinking my coffee throughout because there's never enough coffee for me.
Especially these days. I know.
Yes, exactly. I never thought I'd be that person so dependent on caffeine, but.
No, the pandemic really.
Yes. I do switch to water in the afternoon for my health, right? Okay, I will wait one more minute. That way for those who were getting us.
Teague is going to be really happy about this because he's a stickler for small committee sizes.
Yes. So we have another person like the 8 to 8 or 8 to 13. So you could say 10, 9, something like that. You might be able to have a happy medium there. All right. So I am going to close voting. Thank you. This is actually really helpful. These are things that people agonize over, like
I know.
how many should we have and who should be on it. Okay, so this one is an open-ended question. So what are some ways that we could make sure we engage those that are interested, but do not actually end up serving on a committee? We mentioned a few. So I'm going to actually, but feel free to type in, this in particular is something that, I feel like I'm not very innovative. So like, I would love to see people have interesting ways that they, engage people and things if you can't actually come to be on a committee or be on a meeting.
And I have a maybe very specific question on this too, is, this is also the city of Milwaukee's plan. So the CDA is convening around it. Hopefully it will be adopted by the city. But I think, thinking of ways that we could use our elected officials or other city resources, I'd love to hear if folks think that would be an effective way.
Check-ins are good. I
Yeah,
think
website, we've got some work to do. We do have a landing page right now, but I definitely think we need to, we will be putting some more effort into that.
Yep. Oh, that's a good one. I have a similar for a bunch of our projects where you have a broader distribution for people who are just want to stay in touch to kind of the work of that's happening, but aren't on the actual committee. One-on-one coffees, great idea for those people who maybe even you invite to the committee, but say, I don't have the time. A lot of this too is, I think, creating a very specific and intentional structure to do the process. So we send out emails every other month. We send out a survey. We are going to do one-on-ones with this group of people. But I think that really helps people feel like they're being, the communication part is what I'm trying to get is really so important. Sometimes it's
surveys.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a couple different survey ideas.
Yep. Those might be good tools for when the implementation teams get to a piece of the work. So maybe it's a subgroup, but maybe it's a question of, I wonder what the broader group thinks about this, where you could do a survey around, let's say it's a production model and we want to advance this, something around the land trust, but we're not sure how to do X, right? That's where surveys could actually be really effective with this broader network, it seems. Oh, we're getting some great suggestions.
Yeah, really great.
Group dynamics. Yeah, thank you, everybody. When I put this question out there, I was like, I don't even know what people would say.
Road shows.
Yeah, road shows.
And I think this is, one of the, this is really, really helpful. We are very new. Even though CDA has been around for 10, 11 years now, this is the first time we've really been staffed and had a clear strategy. And so we're sort of, we're still in startup mode. And so all of this will really help us as we think about what our long-term sustainability looks like.
Yep. I like the suggestion around bullet point emails. I'd really try, and people know I send out lengthy emails. I'm so sorry because I'm communicating usually a lot of information. I try to put in a short sentence paragraphs, bullet points. Because
polling app. I like that idea. I do think the benefit of the Zoom culture is that we've thought of new ways to get in touch with more people.
Yep. I think we have a lot that we've learned over the last year, particularly with some of our neighborhood groups and how they have been reaching residents through technology,
texting.
And so the point with this is to create a real methodical way of both communicating information, but engaging people, whether it's via committee or the broader group. So
yeah, this is great.
Okay, so I'll wait 2 more minutes just to see. I realized if I clicked on it again, it did this cool scrolling thing. All these things I'm learning.
Thank you. I got one reaction to my elected officials, which is a maybe not.
Yeah. Yes. And I actually, that point about elected officials in particular, I think our city departments are really great and engaged. UEDA's been it's been beneficial. We've been able to work with different folks across the years for many different things. But I find, and I'm sure it's because it's information overload and there's a lot to do with council in particular, if you're talking about city government, but county. But I find sometimes, they're a little behind the curve on what's happening out in the community because it is hard to keep track of. And so if we can think of ways to say, oh no, there's a really great housing program that's very similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Chrissy, that could be really part of CDA's agenda, is just to make sure that we're doing more regular check-ins with electeds on this. I mean, I think sometimes we put our heads down and get to work, but just being more intentional about those government relations.
Right. Yeah, we've tried to do that with Take Root over the years. It was a little bit easier when the foreclosure crisis was still like in crisis mode to get attention. But I think knowing that housing is really on everyone's radar, there's a unique opportunity to engage them in this. And I'm glad since we kind of went down that road, we had quite a couple more come through. So I'll wait till 10:04 and then we will close this one. And, please remember, when I send out the email too, there might be a couple other ways we can always reply. And if there's something that you thought of afterwards that you weren't able to put into the Menti, you can share it directly, and we can make sure that it gets in there. So, all right, so it's 10:04. And we're gonna go with it. So, okay, so we're gonna zoom in on the topic, the approach rather, that came to the top in our voting. And we're going to do this probably for one of these. And this is where afterwards we could do a survey where you could answer these similar questions for the other two with acquisition fund, mainly because, time it depends on how long this takes. But the idea is to zero in on one of the approaches and then think about what types of groups or people should be represented on the team when it comes to new production models. And so again, this is an open-ended question. Feel free to call out specific groups or particular people that people who might even be on this call today, on this meeting.
Yeah, and I think particularly, I'm really interested on the innovation side. There's a lot, as we said, there's a lot of folks who are already working in that space. And so how do we make sure that on a small committee, we're being representative of the work that's already being done, and maybe filling some gaps. I think particularly around that innovation and finance, I think is an area where we could use some ideas.
Yeah. I'm going to call out one specifically.
Yes.
I think the work that has been done over the last 9 months to a year, so get that groups working in the space already, I think there's been a pretty great scan, if you will, of who's doing that. But I think this was the idea of diverse group too. So new ideas and making sure when it comes to new production models, I go to the land trust because that's top of mind for me, just because we have been doing some work with folks around that. But there could be other things that people are doing there in the community that we're just not aware of, or the market. Really, some of our private developers might have some interesting things that they are working on that really could align with that. That's a great point about residents and neighborhood associations. Particularly when you talk about new forms of ownership or producing housing, creating housing, the process, it's one thing to have, the land trust is a good example. And I was talking to another TA provider about this last year. It's great to have a land trust, but if the buyers, you need to do some education of what that means to own a property in a trust and things like that. So let's see if I will start scrolling down. And so, really talking to people about what that might mean and what that opportunity could represent for folks, is a big component to the success of these alternative models. Great suggestion with youth in the Latinx community, social media.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, green and healthy homes. Yep.
I know the Green and Healthy Homes has been really engaged in the lead remediation work. And so I think maybe we'll hear more about how some of the art money might be helping us align those initiatives.
Yeah.
Architects.
Shoot, I had a thought that popped in my head and just went out. Oh, great suggestion around people in the rental market. You know, for so long in this space, I mean, we talk about this at Take Root, even though the housing market right now for buying homes is really kind of bonkers, with a lot of first-time home buyers kind of getting priced out because, you know, inventory is so tight and that pushes pricing up and opportunities as well. But I think we are still a relatively affordable market for people to buy homes. And so people who rent are paying rent. The rent payments that they make are really not all that much different than a mortgage payment they could be making, particularly in the neighborhood, in certain neighborhoods that they're renting in, if they want to stay in that neighborhood. So, and Jean, I was thinking too, the residents with lived experience, you know, that is something that in this sector has been top of mind for a long time, and ensuring that these working groups have people, you know, with the lived experience. And so that requires a different set of thinking around how you get somebody like that engaged and interested in participating in something like this.
Yeah, and we'll be sharing a little more about the community engagement and resident engagement commitment that CDA has made in our next section here.
Right. And I mentioned in the chat that, you know, I had connected the eco team to our contacts at Freddie Mac because I knew they had this like innovation division that we've been talking about, and also manufactured housing is one of their duty to serve priorities. So they just have, you know, I think that's another thing is like these sort of national or level groups, like, you know, Grounded Solutions is one when it comes to, you know, cooperative models, but I think there's a TA expertise and even just resources of people that operate on a national scale that could really, you know, bring some viewpoints that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and timing wise, I mean, I think, you know, when we set out on this journey, we had sort of made our minds up to focus on housing pre-pandemic, but certainly with the influx of resources coming into the city, the county, and the state, we have opportunities to actually implement in a much different way than we ever would have anticipated.
Yeah, it's I always think of the phrase, it's a long road to hoe, but like, yeah, the road got a little bit easier.
Yeah.
In a way.
A different set of challenges, that's for sure, right? We've got a lot of money coming in and now we've got to make sure we expend it to the highest use.
If any of you participated in our Con Plan Navigators webinar last month, where we created these tools for the consolidated plan, and there's a COVID-19 section on each one. And I put the same phrase in like almost every one, but it was like, because of COVID-19, home had a whole new different meaning or something like that. Like, and I felt like it was super repetitive, but it was true. Like people were spending a lot more times in their homes. And if people don't have safe or affordable housing, that became that just shone a light for so many people who maybe didn't think about that often, how important that is. So yes, great. Oh yes, our education institutions too. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to think about that. So we'll wait one more minute. We have two more questions. And the third one might be somewhat repetitive to this, but we'll see. When we're thinking about new production models. Okay, all right. So the next one is, when it comes to creating new production models, what questions do you think they should be answering to sort of help design implementation? So what are some of the first things that they should be looking at? And so like Gina had mentioned, the slide, you know, on that talked about alternative physical structures, multi-generational housing related to zoning, how you actually make this work in the market. So we know whether it's you're developing it new or you're rehabbing, you have to put properties into a trust, right? You know, these are all very new things. So what kind of whether it's a logistical question, it's a governance or a criteria or how this should be administered, like those kinds of things. So I know this is kind of a harder question to sort of think about, but at least we thought we'd ask it to get a starting point for this implementation team. So.
Yeah, and I think some of the other, questions that we've been, I think, just stewing on is, do we start with, we've got a lot of energy around some priorities. And so is it starting with what we already have and trying to scale those? Is it thinking about pilots? Is it focused on, highest ROI in terms of, what's the most affordable solution? Affordability and quality is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been a lot of fear around the sense of like manufactured homes, not looking cheap. And I think there's been a lot of innovation in that space. And so really understanding that there's, new tools, new resources that we maybe aren't familiar with.
Yeah. That point about the beating investors to market and on bulk purchases is a great one. It actually is a way where you connect this strategy to the acquisition fund strategy area.
Yeah, and the point about, I think really important is, are we cannibalizing resources from others? And I think, when we, in the plan, we were really clear about saying, this is what a steady state looks like, and this is what new resources look like. And so I think we're going to have to be continually asking that question around what is new and what's increasing current capacity versus adding capacity.
Oh, that question about the assurance that this will be different is really great too.
Yeah, I think that the point around zoning, I think a big question for us is going to be, do we have the work groups focusing on implementation and advocacy policy, or do we have sort of an umbrella team that looks at the policy piece? I think there's so much to do in each of these buckets.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing to think about in that is this is where maybe local government can really help. They have intergovernmental relations and people who are keeping their eye on what's happening at a legislative level or state that can really be resources to this work. It's really hard to keep an eye on that when you're in doing the work on the ground. So, from a capacity perspective, that might be a great way to engage them.
Yeah, and Christy, I'd be interested if you think there's a role for the statewide Take Root at all to be,
Yes.
a thought partner on this.
Yes, I think there is. That is really, Take Root Wisconsin, the idea around that was it could serve as a real advocacy piece, and being housed at WISCAP, Wisconsin Community Action Program, where they already have that statewide network, is going to be, really beneficial, where that group could really think about what kinds of housing issues and policies could we work together to advocate with our legislators for. That's another group that needs a lot of education, if you will, on housing. It looks different. I always, for 15 years, I've been working at UEDA, and I early on was doing HUD TA, and I would work with other state partners. And I was always struck by how the challenges are actually always very similar. It's around affordability and quality of housing and those kinds of things. But the approaches have to look different because the communities are different. And so there's actually more in common, if you will, than there isn't. But the state often operates as if every place is so different, we have nothing in common. Their problems are their problems. That's just really not the case. And it's too easy to fall into that. And education of our legislators is a really critical part of changing that dynamic.
Even I think on our implementers too, I know Todd, you're on the call today, and having had, statewide experience, just understanding how affordable housing has been implemented in other cities across the state would be really helpful.
Yeah. Ooh, housing initiatives factoring in climate adaptations. Great question. That's something particular when you talk about new kinds of housing. That's where actually the Eco project is really tuned into, is looking future to green homes, energy efficient, things that consume less energy. It's also, for the consolidated plan, we had to talk about what they called, it's the hazard mitigation section. So not like you would know that was really about climate change until you read the questions. But it's about in what is our geographic landscape and what are the threats, if you will, related to climate change that kind of impact people in the community. And a lot of it is around flooding and severe weather events. And so your housing obviously has to be developed and created and maintained in such a way that you're not impacting them people at that level with those sorts of things coming by.
I really
like
like
a long-winded answer, but
yeah. This question too around leveraging public funding, I think we have to. And so I think for me, that takes me to, we need some really smart finance folks to join this to think about how we can really maximize those 30, 40, $50 million that are really coming in for housing initiatives.
Oh, great. Rusty, and I just saw your comments, and Bill, thank you, because I was excited to try this tool, but I was not completely certain I could operate it effectively. So, yay. Informal statewide land trust group. I'll let Joanna know too, Rusty, and I can connect her. I think she's going to try to join today, but I don't see her. So I'll just make a note. I also would say the leveraging of public and private. We have a great model with DCD and the neighborhood stabilization plan funds that came out in aftermath of the foreclosure crisis. So, Maria Prioletta was really at the forefront of that. And Sam Leichling, they were my partners at that point. And they, one thing I learned in that with that work was that the city of Milwaukee was actually very good at leveraging the NSP dollars with private dollars and creating programs that did that. Mm-hmm. I learned other communities just gave a lot of it out as grants and weren't able to help as many people and, reach as many homes and that kind of a thing. So, the folks at the city that have experience with this, that is a great resource that we have to think about when ARPA dollars are coming or other sorts of public investments. What can we add on from our private sector partners, our financial institutions? We had Damien talking and Bill, they're all interested. All of this meets their CRA obligations in many ways. So there's a lot of innovation too that could happen. Are we leaving out anyone? Great question. So we'll do this for one more minute. Remember how I said we were running ahead of time? And now we're actually on time. So, but I think we'll still end before 11. Like I said, I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but
this is just really phenomenal participation. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we just got one more. So I'll wait. I'll do 2 minutes. That way, if somebody's typing, they have a few more minutes.
This question of how to engage residents in a meaningful way is one that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So I really appreciate that it's raised. It's hard. It's hard especially when you're on a citywide plan, for us to try and tap into resident voice from across the city is an area where we definitely, we want to be effective, and we are happy that the question is continually raised to us.
Yep. That's a kind of issue that I feel like you always have to be challenging yourself to think about. And so you need people at the table who can do that, because sometimes it's too easy to get focused on the thing you're trying to do. It takes longer. I mean, that's like the crux of our collaborative work that we do. But that relationship building and that engagement of people and always challenging yourself, you come out at the end of it in a better place, but it's harder work to do. Contractor capacity, I'll just say yes. That's a hard one. It's a tough nut to crack, but important.
I also really love that someone waited till the end here to drop the toxic ego comment. Thank you. I will be on a crusade to squash the toxic egos.
It is something I wish we didn't have to do, but people are people. And I'm glad that's actually the one thing about this Menti tool that's really great, because people can put things like that in.
Yes.
You don't know who said it.
I appreciate it.
We're all glad you said it. Okay, So I am going to close it, but again, there's always an opportunity if you think of somebody or a question that you think should be given these implementation teams there, we will ask again. So, okay. Where am I going? Here we go. All right, so this question is sort of repetitive from the first one, but it's kind of another way to get at it again, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. But when it comes to new production models, is there anybody, other groups that maybe you didn't get a chance to put in, or maybe you came to mind after we talked about what kinds of questions the team should be looking at? Now is a good time just to do one last round of that. That should be either to participate or even a potential collaboration, because the work that they're doing is already advancing in this way. So, one last shot at the bow, off the bow. See, I'm not a nautical person, clearly, so. Thanks. Yes, we did not say that, but great. I mean, I'm surprised I didn't put it in myself on my phone before, but. Somebody had mentioned CDFIs and alternative lenders, non-traditional lenders, however you want to call it.
I would just add one sort of comment here is that, we have engaged the Wisconsin Policy Forum on some of our research. And Tony Pansier is here, so Greater Milwaukee Committee's tapped into some national resources. So I think through those sort of research studies and then some of the project funding that they've been able to tap into, we've been able to look also at some national models. So not that that's the end all be all, but I think learning from, thank you, Twin Cities, yep, learning from some other places is also part of the agenda here.
Schools also, yeah.
MGSC.
Yeah, I actually put that one in and I was like, I couldn't come up with a good name, but people who, they do some lending, but they're actually, they're not like a traditional bank, but they're in that space and actually operate on a national level. That's that other.
Yeah, healthcare. We do have, it's been great to have Bridget Clemente from Children's has been on our executive committee. And we are having some, I think we're starting to set up some conversations with the Milwaukee Healthcare Partnership on the role healthcare could play.
Acre grads, yep. Oh yeah, the Mutual Housing Network, yep.
I actually don't know what that is.
It's the group that's looking at cooperative ownership of housing, I believe. Yeah. Yes. These are things too for me, like if I'm asked the question, it's like all of a sudden my mind goes blank. Like I need other people's things to help me figure out. Oh, I'm gonna put one in actually, just so it's captured, but we've been talking to, there's 2 other take routes in the country. One in Chicago, which is structured very differently. It's but Take Root South Florida is someone we've been talking to. They're collaborative like us, and their market down there is so different, but also similar. Like they have very similar market dynamics of investor properties. It covers like Palm Beach County. It's huge, lots of municipalities and higher wealth communities. So they have a real shortage of workforce housing. So they have a couple land trusts. They have a lot of interesting things. And then their housing stock is starting to get older. When I told them our average age of our housing stock, they were like, no way. But they're starting to figure out, and because of hurricanes and their threat of climate change, they can't really use like certain kinds of manufactured modular housing. So different kinds of challenges, but also some really great resources there. So I say that only because I didn't want to forget, but groups like that that operate in a different geography, but may
Mhm.
have a lot of experience or expertise. This is really great, everybody. Thank you. I was like, we're getting really, like I said, I feel like it was a repetitive question. Was asking the same thing again, but I feel like we got a different set of answers. So
Yeah, and I think, some of the joint applications for public money right now, I think have forced us to think about this question a little differently. So towards the end of the presentation, we'll share some pending applications, but I think, it's made us think about things specifically like how we have a crisis for educators when it comes to affordable housing. And so is it pulling in some other specific sectors to think about how we could house more workforce housing?
yeah, I just saw the Live Baltimore, I think is what they're referring to. And it would be interesting. We haven't talked to them in a while, like kind of where they are at now. That was a few years ago, we're looking at like neighborhood marketing, but given how the market is so different, and that point about educators and, a lot of times it gets lumped into what we call workforce housing, but you do have to separate those things out and really target groups like, our educators in our community, for them to live in our community, teach in our schools, like those are amazing opportunities. All right, so I'll do one more minute. And then we will move on because we're going to go into our next section, actually, where we're going to talk about resources and community engagement briefly. And then we'll have one more open-ended question. And then for those of you that stick to the end, I'm going to tip this off. We're going to have a drawing or two drawings. Two people will win a gift card to a local restaurant. Oh, thank you, Bethany. All right, Jumpstart Philadelphia. Okay, I'm going to close voting, as I call it. Thank you, everyone. This was an amazing brainstorming session. So, I feel like, this tool, I was really struck by when I used it earlier this summer in another project and how awesome it was for getting just interesting feedback. It kind of speaks to that comment I said about feeding off of other people's ideas.
Yeah.
In a way, even though we can't be in the same room. So your input is very appreciated and will help, sort of structure the next phase and really to stay tuned and connected. And Gina, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
I just wanted to, do we have a minute if anyone had questions, if they want to come off mute?
We do. And in fact, you can submit it via menti.com and people can see your questions. So you can go there. You can also put it in the chat. But menti.com is kind of cool too, because again, then you don't know, if you don't want people to know what you're asking or why you're asking.
Yeah.
And then we can try to answer them as we go.
Do we want to, can you keep the poll open, Christy, if we go to the next section and then we can take questions as?
That I don't know. That would be getting out of my knowledge of this tool.
Of learning this 6 hours ago.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I'll figure this out. It's supposed to, and I will say for anybody who wants to use it, it is very intuitive and very easy to use and import your slides. So, and they have a free version, and then their basic version is very affordable for an organization on a monthly basis. But I was like, am I going to import this and it's going to be all messed up? And no, it wasn't. So
Great.
Yeah. I was imagining myself being up to like 2 a.m. Okay, so Gina, there's a question there in the chat.
When will the committee start? So if Teague were here, he'd give you a specific date. But I think the goal is to, by the end of November, early December, have at least a starting point and say that we've got the initial committees formed. And then I don't think they'll really start digging in until January.
Well, going once, going twice, 3 times. We'll move the slide and go to the next thing, but then Bill has a question too.
Yeah. So how close are we to identifying the organization that will administer this? Do you mean for the acquisition fund bill?
I can unmute you, Bill, too, if you want. Oh, yes.
Yeah. I would say we do not have a good answer for that question yet. I think I think that is one of the first questions that will go to the committee. There have been, lots of ideas sourced. There's lots of national models that we've looked at. We've got lots of local partners who could do it. I think part of our process and the community engagement process, I think, will really help inform that. We want to make sure that whoever's managing the fund is trusted not only by, stakeholders and by the grass tops, but we really want to make sure that grassroots organizations feel that the resources are in a place that they feel comfortable with too.
Yep.
CDA does not intend to hold the funds.
Yeah. An acquisition fund's a big thing. Yeah. And so I just put in the chat, Jenny, the question that we see on the screen is our next slide. So I'm going to move to that, and then we'll have Vanessa and Gina up for that. So Vanessa, do you want me to go first? Because I think the next slide is actually, it digs into the ARPA money. So as this has been, definitely many things flying at us since we have found out about the multiple rounds of ARPA money. And we've been doing our best to keep up and taking advantage of some of these applications while we're still definitely in the strategic planning and implementation planning phase. So not wanting to miss out, we luckily have the city and the county represented and UEDA represented on the executive committee. So I think we've been well positioned to have information coming at us about what our electeds really want to see. So Vanessa will get into the omnibus package next, but we also have some other great partners working with us right now. So the county ARPA funds, I think some of it's still embargoed information, but Jim Matthey has been on our committee and is aligning some of the requests for housing to the top 3 strategies that you'll see in the CDA plan. We also have these 3 opportunities for statewide funding through the Department of Workforce Development, the Neighborhood Innovation Plan, and the Equitable Recovery Funds. Thank you to LISC, who is working with Teague on the DWD Innovation Grant. It's a $10 million application, and it's primarily focused on 2 of our priorities. One would be for workforce housing for early childhood educators. And the second is some seed funding to launch the idea of the modular homes in Century City. So working with the eco department, and then a piece of that would be administration, so that CDA would have capacity to staff those initiatives in the work groups. The city is working on a neighborhood improvement fund application. And Vanessa, I'm not sure if you have more to share on that yet.
Not yet on that one.
Okay. But again, I think our partners at DCD have been really important in making sure that whatever is moving forward is again in alignment with the strategies that are in the plan. And then equitable recovery funds, we have kind of a variety of stakeholders. These are up to $1 million in resources and open still until, I think, till Monday, maybe. And so for those of you who are working in this space, if you have not looked at the Equitable Recovery Fund opportunity, we would encourage you to do so. And then really, really exciting news on the Worth grant. So Wells Fargo invited 25 cities to apply for planning grants. The planning grants were awarded to 16 cities. Milwaukee was one of those awardees with the CDA as the coordinating entity. And the purpose of the 6-month planning grant is for us to bring together a work group to identify how Milwaukee will increase BIPOC homeownership by 5,000 net new units. So we have a huge head start based on the work that CDA has already done. Axe Housing, Revitalize, Habitat, HRI, and another one I'm going to forget right now, all helped with the application process. And so we're really looking at this as a way to leverage the Wells Fargo money as resources for our homeownership work group. And should we be successful, we have an opportunity to apply at the end of our 6-month period for a $7.5 million implementation grant. Of the 16 applicants, 8 cities will be selected, and we're sure we're going to get it. So stay tuned. We're extremely thrilled, and I'm sure you will definitely hear more because we'll be needing to build a work group and get some pretty clear strategies on that 5,000 number. And then pending federal legislation. Is anyone from LISC here? Matt? No.
I
So
thought that registered, but maybe he didn't make it. Up.
okay. So basically there's some legislation pending. Tony, you know a lot about this too.
Yeah, the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act.
Yep.
I can drop the link in. I wouldn't trust me to give the high level of it, but I can add some information to the chat.
Okay, thanks. So we're watching that. And then next I'm gonna turn over to Vanessa because we have some exciting news we've been waiting for.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. Great job facilitating. And Christy, thanks so much for pulling this together. And most importantly, thanks to everyone who's been participating. Really great feedback. And first and importantly, Commissioner Crump earlier gave some kudos to staff. I additionally would like to add to that list both our NIDC, Neighborhood Improvement Development Corporation staff, with Aaron Helt managing that group. And I think I saw Ben Sanchez on here as well. They are administrating all of our 14 housing programs, as well as our real estate staff, Amy Term, the real estate manager, managing marketing, selling, working with all the tenants on our city-owned in-run properties. So these are all the boots on the ground, making things happen, and every day working to increase home ownership of minority families and making sure we have safe, affordable housing citywide. So very exciting news to report. As Jenny alluded to in the chat earlier, last week, the Finance and Personnel Committee considered the first tranche of the ARPA dollars. And yesterday, the full Common Council approved the 193 million that will serve, families most impacted, individuals most impacted by the pandemic. And so this first tranche is 193 million. And so what's on this slide represents the omnibus file that was approved yesterday. So a summary can be found on the left-handed side of the slide, and then highlighted on the right, which is pertinent to today's discussion, is a summary of the affordable housing initiative. So 43.5 million is going to be allocated towards affordable housing to support both the city's existing as well as some new affordable housing programs. So these affordable housing initiatives directly relate to the CDA plan and the 4 strategies that Gina so eloquently summarized earlier. And Jenny asked, how does this align? And I'd like to give a very specific example. So the city launched a down payment assistance program. There was 1.4 million allotted to this program, and it was launched in June, and it's been extremely successful. So the program allows homeowner support, and it provides grants to income eligible City of Milwaukee residents. And they can use these grants for down payment and closing costs. And this is really to address the disparity in home ownership rates. We're working with 3 home buying counseling agencies. They're probably all here this morning. And so far, 136 families have been awarded grants in the amount of close to $900,000. And over 95% are families of color, and over 60% have purchased homes in the community development block grant areas. So the remaining funds are going to be committed by the end of this year. And so we're going to be out of money. So the ARPA funds that were approved yesterday by Common Council, we can use more of those funds to continue this. And it also is a specific recommendation or approach in the CDA plan. And I think that's all that I have for now. Thank you.
Good. I just put a comment, when those funds were allocated through the TIF last year, everyone was super excited because there's always been this pool of down payment assistance funds that the agencies tap into via the state, the Federal Home Loan Bank, like there's a lot of other things, but having this kind of investment just really catalyzes the number of families. And all for the 11 years Take Root Milwaukee has been doing this, the lack of down payment and then credit issues, those are those two biggest challenges. And so working with those counseling agencies and really making sure that they have the capacity, they do awesome, amazing work with buyers. And so I was so glad to hear when Mike had sent me the, just the great success rate, the number of families and who it's reaching already was very great. So.
Yes, and I apologize, Christy. I should have called out Take Root specifically. So thank you.
It's okay. I did like 20 times on the chat. So apparently I wasn't. And I was like, oh, I see my typo too. I should have made that like big and yellow. So I forgot to take it off. I was like, when I made the slide, they had not voted yet. All right. So now we're going to talk about the community engagement process.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I think part of the process that we used when we expanded the governance structure was that we also invited 2 resident liaisons to join the executive committee. So Tammy Rivera from SOC and Nell Cross from Metcalf Park Community Bridges have been really instrumental in CDA's commitment to what we're calling an ongoing resident and community engagement process. Our first step in formalizing that is issuing an RFP, which is really intended to enhance participation with those community-rooted organizations. The scope, the RFP was issued and is due at the end of the month. So we would be happy to share it when we send out the materials. We have a review committee that is made up of some of our program committee members and our executive committee members. And really the idea here is that over the next 6 months, initially, it'll be a year-long scope, but in the next 6 months particularly, that we have community-based organizations directing the CDA about how best to do community engagement. So knowing that that's not our expertise, this will be a contracted work. The idea is that this would be something that we continue to do. So once we have this kind of initial framework done and some of these initial engagement sessions under our belt, that we would continue to work with consultants to make sure that we have a continuous feedback loop. So we hope that we'll have some great responses and that we would be able to start this contract on December 1st. So please share with your networks. We will make sure that you get a copy.
Great. And now for our list, we'll send that out. I was just making a note. I'll probably, this group who had registered and attend, you guys might get 2 emails from us in the next few weeks, but I'll make it short or try. So this last question is really about this resident partners. And so it's an open-ended question again via the site, but you can also feel free to use the chat. And sort of thinking about what are some ways that the CDA could work with resident partners on these 3 approaches. And, this would really help inform the folks that, that end up being selected through that RFP. You could give them a little place to start and help, seed some of their ideas that they had in the RFP. So I would say some of the tools that were mentioned in our earlier question, I think there's a lot of applicability. So obviously this would be shared too, but again, just in case, I feel like the last time I asked a repetitive question, we actually got really great results. So why not try again?
And I think, I'll just add here, this is, many of you have heard me talk about this. I've been working in this space for my whole career, and this is still the hardest part of my job, is to try and figure out how do you balance moving quickly, aligning stakeholders, aligning resources with the absolutely vital and important work of making sure residents have a voice in the process. And it never feels like we have enough time or that we have enough resource or we have enough voice. And so I really am, we're eager to think of innovative ways to do it or pull on other models that have been really successful, because, we know that CDA won't be successful if it's only institutional partners who are at the table.
Right. My first program at UEDA, I was telling Gina this the other day, is I was a resident-based program. I had worked with a group of residents around asset building. And, it was always so clear to me that they were doing this out of their own time, like they had families, jobs, school, whatever. And were choosing to spend time with me every month or every other month to do something that they felt was like really important for their community or their neighborhood. And so, I took that very seriously, but sometimes it's easy to take it for granted too. So, this is really trying to keep that in perspective. And so it just doesn't become like a show pony, if you will, like that. Their participation is so critical and meaningful to this work. Okay. Oh, I like that comment around trust building and not the
Yeah.
legend. Great comment too about the system in place, that they may already have for communicating with folks.
Yeah, and I think once we have our responses to the RFP, it'll be great for us to do, whether it's, through UEDA, through CDA, other partners, to just make sure that the consultants that are identified have an opportunity to do some of this, I think, broader audience engagement right away, so they can tell us what their vision is.
Yeah, and great point about the difference between a community listening association or community listening and then a meeting or something like that, that you'd structure that differently than a focus group.
Reward. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nobody's sad when they get a reward.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll do one more minute. And it's funny, remember how I said, I thought we were doing these sooner. I thought we'd end up.
I know,
around
me too. I was like, oh, we're going to be in an hour today, Christy. That's what
Yeah, well, this process took longer, but it's really great. I know it's harder. And if people are doing this on their phone, if you're trying to type something in there, it's a little crazy, but we really appreciate your time, because I feel like the feedback that we've gotten is really nuanced in ways that you might not have had if you just tried to ask people to say something. And we hopefully allowed enough time for people to think a little bit before responding as well. Okay, we're at 10:50. I think we've been at 18 responses, so I'm going to stop. But again, like we've said all along, doesn't mean that the feedback doesn't necessarily process stop after today in this Menti slide. So, okay. So next steps, these were shared after the October 1st meeting, but they're still sort of the same, like consider responding to the RFP for these resident action groups and share the RFP with people you think that would be great for it. Look for a survey from the CDA around this process. Again, some feedback we got today, I think would be really helpful in designing that survey. And so that the CDA can kind of keep moving on their timeline. And then this budget meetings, the council passed yesterday, but the counties is still in play. There are other opportunities in the state. So if that fits in your wheelhouse and you're following that, really make sure you can do that and continue to advocate for investments in affordable housing. You can't take anything for granted. And so the last thing is to, and housingplan.org too. Thank you. I knew I was missing something when I was doing
I forgot to put it on here.
Yeah. Stay tuned and connected. So, we talked about it earlier, these other touch points for people, like even if you're not on an implementation group, there's other networks. If let's say, I mean, Lord knows I've talked enough about Take Root today. If you're not involved and want to know more, please feel free to reach out. There's other groups. There's the Mutual Housing Network, the Land Trust, right? There's a lot of ways you can really put these energies into play. But there's also future CDA meetings. Gina mentioned they'll have quarterly sessions. And then this emerging topic sessions is something we do every year now. We do 3 of them. And so we are always happy to lend this vehicle, if you will, to highlight and help move forward the good work in our community too. And I'm going to put my email in there before I forget. So Gina, I don't know if you wanted to add anything before we go to the.
Just a huge thank you. I think we were not sure if this would be an exciting opportunity for feedback. And this was just, it far exceeded our expectations. We're really thankful for the feedback.
Yes, cheers. I would do that little emoji with the cheering thing, but I think because I'm the host, I can't do that. So
I'll do
or
it
at least
for
I don't
you.
know how. So. So the last thing, this is our thank you for joining us slide at our emerging topics series. Again, we really appreciate your energy, investment, and time with us today. And so we look forward to continuing the good work. Stay in the loop. These are our upcoming things for UEDA at the bottom. We have our annual gathering for members and membership network. Our third homeownership disparities webinar with my cohorts, Bethany Sanchez and Lamont Davis, our co-chairs for Take Root. We're going to focus on the lending marketplace and Carnival Milwaukee fundraiser. Still not sure if we'll be in person, but we will do something like we did this year, which was really great. So supporting local restaurants and businesses. So stay tuned. So we're going to do 2 raffle drawings. I'm going to stop sharing because I think hopefully